Hello. Today we're going to be talking about how to create a research matrix for your lit review. So I'm going to go into the folder for week 4 and into the subfolder for assignment 2 in week 4, creating a research matrix. And the first thing we're going to look at is the completed version of Josephine Student's lit review from week 1, which I hope you remember. And what I want to point out to you is how Josephine used multiple sources to support her first theme and multiple sources to support her second theme, but she really only had one source who expressed what she was calling the conservative view of cloning and cloning in film, the piece by Phyllis Schlafly. And it really would have been better for her lit review if she had had more than one source to express that view. And this is what making a matrix for your lit review will help you to do. It will help you to be sure that you see shared themes in your sources and decide which sources you would use to support each theme, and possibly even find new sources or new themes. So first we're going to look at some examples of lit review matrices from different disciplines. These are scientific and social scientific disciplines. Here is one on the Ebola vaccine. This is an example of a really hardcore scientific approach where the author is looking probably at many studies of a particular scientific or social scientific issue, and they will have the key information, the author's name, the title of the source, and the name of the journal, title of the journal, the year of publication, and the purpose of the study. And after that, they will have in each box a small amount of very specific information that will tell them easily how the results in each study differed from results obtained in other studies that looked at this same specific scientific issue. So that's the very hardcore model. You probably won't be using that in any of your lit reviews, but you may be asked to use that type of model in a future assignment in a different class. If we look at the other examples, they're less rigorous, if you like. Here's one on personal learning environments, which has the themes down the side and the sources across the top, with quotations and data from each source on each theme or supporting each theme. This is much more like what you're going to be doing for your paper. So if you look at my matrix that I made for my imaginary paper on tourism in the Galapagos Islands, you'll see that I essentially followed that model of themes down one side and sources across the top. I happen to have color-coded this just so that you can easily see the way that I use each of these sources for each of the themes in my paper. You don't have to color-code your matrix. I do have all the information I need for each source at the top, all the information I need to create a correct citation, whether in MLA or in APA format. These are not correct MLA or correct APA, but the information is there for me to create the citation that I need to create. Down the side of the matrix, I have my themes. Tourism, all tourism damages the Galapagos Islands. And as you can see, all my sources support that theme. Second theme, there's a complex relationship between tourism and conservation, and 3 of my sources support that theme. My third theme, different interest groups on the island don't agree, and all of my sources give me evidence to support that theme. Finally, the effects of the island's unique relationship with Ecuador on the problems involved in conservation. And again, all of my sources give me at least one piece of evidence to support that theme. So that's really ideal. If you can get all or nearly all of your sources to support all of your themes, that's the sign of a well-designed lit review or a well-designed research paper. So let's look next at the process that I used to create that matrix. If we open this folder, you'll see that first of all I have the notes on my original 4 articles, and they're color-coded to match what you saw on the matrix. And you can open up each page of notes to look at it in more detail, but you'll see that I have quotations and some summaries too. I tend to like to use quotations because then I can feel really confident that I am not misrepresenting what I originally saw in the source. But of course, eventually I will have to change my quotations into summaries, especially in an APA paper. And the other articles, as you'll see, are similar. So let's look next at the way that I used the material from all 4 sources to support my 4 themes. So you can see here is the evidence that I'm using in the section of my lit review on my first theme, and you can see that I'm using evidence from all of my sources. Same in the segment of my review on all my other themes. Multiple sources are being used to provide evidence for my discussion of that theme in the literature. So that's a kind of visual representation of what each section of your lit review ought to be doing. And the important thing to remember here is, as I say in the label for this particular subfolder, that you are not presenting in your lit review one summary of one source followed by one summary of another source followed by one summary of a third source. You are taking your sources apart and putting pieces from each source into different parts of your paper. You're creating your own structure that serves the purpose of your literature review, and you're using pieces from the sources to create that structure. Now, when I looked over my notes, I saw a few pieces that really didn't seem to fit in any of my 4 themes. So I had some pieces that seemed to be all about fishing and fishermen. So I wondered if I could have a section on that, a 5th theme having to do with fishing and fishermen. But this would be like a list of sources or a section that would be just a conglomeration of disparate information. You know, here's a bunch of stuff that I know vaguely about this subject. And instead of being a focused subsection in my review that really serves the review. And in addition, I had 3 different leftover pieces that were not about fishing and which seemed interesting to me. So I thought about ways that I could possibly use this material to create a 5th theme. So I found a new source which, just by digging around, the sources that I had left over seemed to suggest a kind of different view of conservation that questioned the whole idea of a pristine environment and getting back to the way nature originally was. And so I tried to find an article that would go in that direction that would support that theme. And I found this article by Davis and others called Don't Judge Species on Their Origins, which told me that in fact some students of conservation, some scholars, are starting to think that ideas like alien species eradication and pristine environments are just unrealistic and also not even scientific. So I decided to make that the fifth theme of my paper, how such new trends in theories of conservation are influencing the debate about how to manage the Galapagos Islands and to manage tourism in that area. So I went and did again, and here's the article, Don't Judge Species on Their Origins. So I went back to the databases again, and I looked for some other articles that might support this fifth theme. I looked at the references page of the Davis article and followed up on some of those sources, did some more digging around with keywords that I discovered, and I ended up finding two more sources that also question the traditional ideas of conservation. And one of them you should remember from the first week of class, Nature's Eden, The Production and Effects of Pristine Nature in the Galapagos Islands, and another one by a very famous scientist who used to teach at the UW-Madison, William Cronin, on criticizing the whole idea of wilderness, pure wilderness. So then I went back to my notes on my original four sources, pulled out the ones that fit that section, and I ended up with a very well-supported fifth section of my paper using my original leftover pieces that didn't seem to fit in anywhere, and then the new material that I had got from the new sources I had found. So I had a new theme that is important in the literature, that represents a view that is really up and coming, and it was also something I really learned something. I discovered something new. So I have finally included here some templates that you can use for your matrix if you would like to. The first one is perhaps more appropriate to a heavily scientific lit review, but certainly if you feel comfortable using Excel, it is very flexible and you can create as many columns as you need. But it's perfectly okay too for you to use Word to create a template like the one I had used in my matrix, simply using the table function in Word and having your themes down one side, your sources across the top, and then expanding downwards, adding an extra column or an extra row if you need to, and cutting, copying and pasting in your notes or typing them in, whichever you prefer. But that's what I'm expecting you to hand in on Sunday, is something that looks like this, where I can easily see the themes that you're thinking of using in your lit review and the sources from which you are getting them, and hoping to see that most or even all of your sources support all of your themes. And of course, here in the folder you also have the link to submit the research matrix. So I hope that that has been helpful in showing you how to create your research matrix. If you have any questions, please let me know by email or by phone if necessary, and I look forward to seeing your research matrices on Sunday.